Good afternoon, everyone, on a Saturday at the Voice of College Football. Welcome into our live call-in show. We welcome all of you in just about 15 minutes late. Blame me. I am tardy. We did have a few technical hiccups, but at the same time, I should have been prepared to go on early. So that was a New Year's resolution that I have yet to follow through on each and every time. So again, my apologies. Thank you so much for your loyalty. Thank you so much for your patience in waiting. A whopping 3 on the line. We hope to make that about 250 or 300 within the next couple hours, talking college football with you here again at MarkRogersTV, the Voice of College Football. So I'm mostly talking to those people, now 23 on the line, mostly talking to those people that will be watching the video once we get 2,000 or 3,000 views. The topic for today. Now understand that any time we post a topic, that doesn't mean that you have to talk about the topic. We talk college football top to bottom. Nothing is off the table in regards to college football talk with me. We talk college football every day, 24/7, 365. Nothing is off the table. But the topic that I served up for today goes back to a review I made over the last 3 football seasons in looking at some of the major college football publications. Athlon's, Street and Smith's, Phil Steele. I don't know that Phil Steele. I shouldn't say Phil Steele for sure. And God bless Phil. He's been on our show 3 times, and I hope to have him back leading into 2021. So I don't believe I looked at Phil's necessarily, but Street and Smith, Athlon's, Lindy's. I think those were the 3 that I looked at. All excellent publications down through the years that I have purchased countless times. Or on a rare occasion, it's been very nice that they have sent me a complimentary copy. But what I noticed in looking at the publications, while they are packed with information, they are for the information junkie, the person that wants heights and weights and stats and schedules and metrics, rankings and statistics. Okay. But in terms of predictions, the predictions were always safe. And the reason I say that is that there's nothing wrong with the person who predicts Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson to make the college football playoff, because then they are typically right in those 3 occasions. There's nothing wrong with that. Or if they predict Alabama to beat Ohio State in the national championship game, just I know of somebody out there that picked Alabama in August to beat Ohio State in the national championship game. I know that there was somebody that actually forecasted that. So anyway, there's nothing wrong with predictable predictions or chalk predictions, if that's what you truly believe. So I am not for the person that prognosticates to provide and deliver clickbait or the shock value, and they pick a college football playoff of Utah, Iowa State, Northwestern, and North Carolina just to shock people, just to stir up views and stir people up and get conversation going. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with the people that just stick so close to the vest because they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to look stupid. They think Texas could possibly make the college football playoff, but they think, I'm going to get ridiculed. And if I play it safe, then I'm going to be right most of the time. No. I like a combination of the 2 where somebody will actually predict what they believe is going to happen, and they will take calculated risks. The reason I bring that up is in titling this particular call-in show what I did in basically targeting your team and whether they're going to improve in 2021 or decline in 2021. I wanted to focus on one thing. That I've reviewed those 3 publications for 3 consecutive years, and they on average would only target 3 teams or predict 3 teams in the Power 5 to increase or decrease their win total by 3 games or more. So take a 6-6 team and project them to go 9-3. Take a 6-6 team, project them to go 3-9. Do whatever math you want. They would only select, on average, about 3 teams in the Power 5 out of 75 teams, roughly 75 teams if you include the independents, to either dramatically improve or dramatically decline Why is that important? Why does that not make sense? Because over those 3 college football season, an average of, get this, not 3 per season, 19 per season would either drastically improve by at least 3 games or decline by at least 3 games. Michigan State, for example, in 2016 went 3-9. The next season in 2017, they went 9-3 in the regular season. We can't project bowl results, postseason, college football playoff. Not talking about that, leaving that alone, just looking at the regular season, because that's the only thing we have a schedule for. So my point is that those publications are basically selling information, and then they are tacking on the predictions as being a industry leader, and then selling those predictions as legit. Well, they may turn out to be right from time to time, but they're obviously not able to project a program on the upsurge or on the decline. They stick close to the vest, and they basically give you the same results as what you just saw last season. They basically take last season's results, tweak them by a game or two, and give it to you this season. All right, that all leads us into today's topic, which is take your team. Your team. And you can look at other teams, of course, but start with your team. Do you expect a significant improvement for 2021 or decline in 2021? Unfortunately, with the odd number of games that were played all across the map, it's going to be difficult to both project, and it's going to be difficult to assess the difference going forward. Shoot, Arizona State fans, your team went 1-2. 1-2. Arizona State is the team of the year. They are the pandemic team of the year because they only played 3 football games, 1-2, at least in the Power 5. I know that there were some rough situations out there involving a school in Arkansas. Don't know if it was Arkansas Pine Bluff who only had, I might be wrong on that designation, but there was a team in, I believe it was Arkansas, that was only playing 1 game. There was a team in North or South Dakota that was only going to play, I believe, 2 games. They were scheduled like 1 in September and 1 in November. Can you imagine getting the entire team together, launching your season, kicking off the season, playing the 1 game, and then saying, hey, we're going to practice for 8 weeks, and then we'll play in November. And that's going to be our last game of the season. What are we playing for? I don't know. What are we playing for? 860-325-3687. So you see the crawl at the bottom of the screen. Please like the video. People ask me almost every day, Mark, what can we do to help the channel, build the channel? You can like the videos. Like the videos. But if you want to take it an extra step, and this might be the most meaningful thing that you can do, beyond liking the videos, liking the live streams, is for you to go out on social media and share these videos. Whatever your favorite videos are, if you just want to randomly grab anything, or if you're a Texas A&M fan and you like our what has become almost a weekly post on Texas A&M football, share it on social media. Those people that follow you and interact with you that are college football fans, well, if you enjoy what we do here, I got to think that they will. So please help us out by sharing the videos on social media. If you can do anything for us, hit that like button, share the videos on social media as well. Had a phone conversation this morning with a particular individual that I respect a lot, and will be happy to unveil some exciting things involving Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, in the near future if things continue to go in the same direction. All right, now that we've scolded you for not sharing the videos on social media, no, that's an encouragement. Please share the videos on social media. And of course, subscribe. So anybody who doesn't subscribe and you just found us, well, continue to listen, continue to watch, dig into the videos. Let me know if you like it, and certainly subscribe to the channel if you like it. And hopefully you're not choosing to not subscribe for any particular reason. So we need to get the subscriber numbers up as well. Let me dive into the live chat. Let me post the number there at the bottom of the screen. It's 860-325-3687, 860-325-3687. I also thought that this would be a decent time to talk college football leading into the NFL playoff games. We've got Packers, Ravens, Packers, Rams, Packers, Rams. That's the correct R team. Packers, Rams playing at 4:30 Eastern time. Tonight, I believe it's Ravens, Bills, correct? I don't know. I just looked at the NFL playoff schedule. That is something that I used to be on top of more than anything in life, practically. There was a time in which somebody quizzed me, and I could recite the score of every NFL playoff game since the merger. I can no longer do that. You could give me a bracket. You could give me a bracket for each season, starting in 1970, running through last year. And if I worked my way back from the Super Bowl and figured out, okay, these were the teams that played in the championship games and kind of worked my way back, I bet I could fill out those brackets about 95% accurately. All right, I see a super chat. I'm loving it. Thank you so much for that. We will get to it in just a second. We will start from the top here with web security. Excellent early off-season topic. Would like to see a part 2 closer to season that also touches on what changed since this video. Web security, I apologize, but I can't make anything out of that. Excellent early off-season topic. Would like to see a part 2 closer to season that also touches on what changed since this video. Web security, if you want to take this a little bit further, email me at MarkRogersTV@gmail.com. You can always contact me there. If you've got any requests for the off season, I'm going to let you know this is what I'm working on right now. A couple days ago, I released a playoff video that didn't do too well. I was shocked. Everybody's talking about the playoff constantly and expanding the playoff. And so I thought this video would do wonders, but got like 800 views, 1,000 views. So that kind of discourages me from continuing that series. But anyway, what I did was I took every season during the college football playoff era, 2014 through 20, and I took 2 different 8-team formats. One would be the highly popular 5 conference champions, 2 wild cards from the Power 5, and a group of 5 team, and laid out what the 8-team playoff would look like in 2020, each season going back to 2014. I think that provided us with some interesting matchups. Really interesting. Again, that was one format for the 8-teamer. The other was just simply going by the College Football Playoff Selection Committee rankings, which I don't encourage in any such way. And if you've watched me for any length of time, you know why. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hi, Mark. This is Nasic. I watch the show actively. I'm an Ohio State fan, and I was wondering what are your thoughts on Ohio State going into next season, assuming Justin Fields doesn't come back?
Well, I think that there's a huge question at quarterback, but they've got maybe the most talented quarterback room in the country with, of course, Stroud and Miller seem to be the 2 guys that are going to battle it out, and they're extremely inexperienced at this point. I think that they're going to have a team that's going to be more talented than any in the Big Ten by a wide margin. They may trip up once or twice because of the inexperience and breaking in a new quarterback. And they may be more likely to miss a playoff than they have been the last 2 years.
And what do you think about Kyle McCord potentially?
Oh, well, yeah, I could throw him into the mix as well. I don't have any analysis on these new quarterbacks. I don't watch high school football, so I can only go by their scouting reports and their rivals in 247 Sports rankings, which are extremely high for all of them. So to separate the number 2 quarterback in the country and the number 6 quarterback in the country is inconsequential at this point. Who knows who's going to be the best? Because, as you well know, it goes beyond arm strength and even arm talent to having the confidence to run the offense, the intelligence to grasp the offense, to be a leader, to do all the things, to be tough, to get a little bit nicked up and still be able to get out there and run the offense. So in terms of having analysis on any players that haven't played in college, I don't have that because I'm not a scouting guy. I'm not a recruiting guy. I just know that they're all highly touted. And so the room is full of inexperienced, high-end talent. And that's a great place to be on one hand. You would rather have one guy, you would rather have them be at different levels in their career, different stages in their career. That would be the optimum, but you can't control that. So Ohio State's in a place where they're completely inexperienced at quarterback going into next year. But as we've seen with Trevor Lawrence being the prime example, it can work.
But you would think with all the talent coming in and all the talent Ohio State has over the entire Big Ten, you would think that they'd pretty much be the best team in the Big Ten going into next year and go to the playoff, though, right?
Well, I don't know about going to the playoff. Maybe if they go 11-2 in the Big Ten after a Big Ten championship game win, they might not make it. But they're likely to make it. So, of course, if you win the conference, then you probably have a 90% chance of making it. But this could be, as it forecasts, a season in which it might be difficult to get to a playoff despite winning the Big Ten because they might have some hiccups. But hey, yeah, they've got the talent, especially since I don't know if anyone's acknowledging how good the West is becoming and how much the East is deteriorating. So they actually play in the weaker division. I think that they may make the division tougher, but they don't play themselves. So they play the rest of the division. So they actually play, I would argue, until I see more out of Michigan and if Penn State bounces back, you got to say the weaker division of the two.
Yeah, because I looked at the schedule going into the next year. I saw Purdue was on there in Nebraska. Purdue might be an interesting game, though.
Oh, yeah. I would assume that game's going to be at home. Do we know?
I think it's in West Lafayette. I'll have to check that on eventually.
Yeah, I think they've got a string of 3 consecutive games against Nebraska, and this may start. The way I understand the scheduling of the Big. Pardon me?
Yeah, they open at Minnesota also.
Oh, that's right. They got Minnesota. That's on a Thursday night, I believe.
Yeah, and this like toward 2019 where they finish off with at home against Penn State and then at Michigan.
Yeah, I think that Penn State, despite what Indiana showed us this year, I would not be surprised if Penn State reclaims the second spot in the Eastern Division. They've got all their skill position players that matter back. Noah Cain, Jahan Dotson, Parker Washington, Sean Clifford at quarterback, even though I'm not a huge Sean Clifford fan. He's capable. Of course, they lose Micah Parsons, but they retain much of their defense as well. So I actually think Penn State's, as we sit right here in the middle of January, I'm projecting Penn State's going to overtake Indiana and get back into the mix in the Big Ten East.
Hey, one last question before I leave. I know that last year's Ohio State team was better than this year's team defensively, especially. Do you think that team last year would have beaten LSU last year, or this year's Alabama team?
Well, I, like you, I don't know if you've heard me say it here. I just believe that team was better than this year's team. So it sounds like you're on board with that. You can't just, it's difficult to overcome 2 of the 3 best players in the NFL draft. And now we're seeing what Chase Young's doing at the next level. You know, he was that good. He took that much attention, even when he didn't create a ton of disruptive plays. For example, in the Clemson game, it's because he opened it up for everybody else. Jeff Okudah, again, my goodness, can you imagine if Okudah was in that game against Alabama. I'm not saying that they win the game. I'm not saying he makes up for 4 touchdowns, but it just creates a huge difference. And J.K. Dobbins was never replaced. Yeah, Trey Sermon was amazing the final 3 games of the season, really. But J.K. Dobbins is a first-round NFL talent. He wasn't drafted in the first round, but he's showing that he was a first-round talent in the NFL. Yes, that team beats this year's team. That team should have beaten Clemson last year. I'm not going to annoy Clemson fans by letting them know that, the officials made bad calls in that game. That's all there is to it.
I was at that game too.
You were at the game. Yeah, that must have been tough to take.
Yeah.
And I try to cut it straight here. But and I was, I won't go into that. I was going to go down a whole other path. But, man, that would have been a heck of a game. LSU, Ohio State. Give me the Ohio State with a healthy Justin Fields, which he would have been a little bit more healthy. But certainly I'm guessing he still would have had the knee brace and been compromised as a runner in that game.
Yeah, I have my doubts whether or not J.K. Dobbins would have even played against LSU because he had that high ankle sprain.
True.
He didn't recover until.
There you go.
Yeah, he didn't. He said that he didn't recover until he got to the combine, though.
But if you're talking about both teams, and if we had an LSU person on here, I'm sure they could point out injuries that they had during the season that I've forgotten. Just like Alabama fans certainly outlined a number of injuries that they had that took some people off the field, at least before the game or at some point in the game. So it wasn't all that Ohio State just got hurt and that was the story of the games. But give me a healthy LSU, a healthy Ohio State. And the one consideration is that just Ohio State, I don't think it was as obvious or as blatant as this year, but they did win the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball in 2019 over Clemson. Not as much as they did this year, but they were still the better team. So then they go to LSU, take on LSU with, again, I know that the championship game last year was considered a blowout. It was 42-25, but that game was 28-25 with, I'm guessing, about 10 minutes left in the game. It's not like it was just a blowout from the first quarter on. It was, for 50 game minutes, it was competitive. It was a 28-25 game.
Yeah, I watched that game. And Joe Burrow just lit him up. Him and Jamar Chase just lit him up.
Yeah, and surely they would have made tons of plays against Ohio State, but as many plays against the best cornerback in America, I don't know. I don't think so. Yeah,
going in, I think Ohio State will win the Big Ten next year. I just don't see anyone beating them, though. I just feel like they're 2 scores better than everybody else in that conference.
They are. I think the conference has become, I want to state this the right way, because the conference is much better than the Pac-12, but it's become a like Pac-12 in that it's balanced. But that doesn't give you elite competition at the top, like with Penn State dropping off, with Michigan dropping off significantly in the last couple of years. And we'll see about Wisconsin. It's become a bunch of teams that are then throw in Northwestern and Iowa and Minnesota possibly. Then it's become a bunch of teams that are like the 20th best team in the country. A bunch of those, which is great. It's good football, but it's not going to push anybody else toward the elite end of things.
Yeah. I'm still disappointed about what happened on Monday night. I know Alabama was the best team in the country. Could have played a little bit better on defense, though.
It would have been interesting to see them take the completely different tact and go from playing ultra conservative to losing words today for some reason. If they would have become ultra aggressive against Alabama defensively, sure, they would have gotten torched, burned, but maybe they make some plays.
Yeah, but I still thought Alabama and Ohio State were the 2 best teams in the country. Clemson was third and Notre Dame was fourth. Yeah. I think the playoff committee got it right, though.
Well, they did. Well, they got the first 3 right for sure. After that, who knows? Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Oklahoma. You could go all over the place. Look at Cincinnati, what they did against Georgia. I don't know.
Yeah, Luke Fickell blew that game with a bad block management.
Yeah, he did. He did. He let Georgia off the hook. Now, I certainly said going into the playoff, and I had to put Texas A&M, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, and Cincinnati on a sheet of paper and measure each team they beat from the best to the worst, and to do my rankings and to do them justice for all of you and not just spitball it. And I came out with Notre Dame with a slight edge on Texas A&M. So I do think that the committee got it right, but I do think that Texas A&M, Oklahoma, and Cincinnati had valid arguments.
Yeah, in my opinion, I barely even watched that Orange Bowl, that A&M North Carolina game. I mean, that was probably the worst game of the entire New Year's Six games.
Yeah, it was. Are you talking about the Oklahoma-Florida game? Or are you talking about Texas A&M North Carolina?
A&M North Carolina.
Okay.
I mean,
you thought that was a bad game?
I know it was more competitive. I know it was a more competitive game than the Oklahoma game, but because Carolina was down like so many starts because of opt-outs and all that.
From that standpoint, yeah. You didn't get to see the best players play. Yeah, North Carolina was missing its 5 best players, 4 best players.
Yeah, because I was on Twitter and I turned on the fourth quarter and it was a tight game. So I turned it in, but I thought that was probably the worst game of the entire New Year's Six both.
Really?
And then the Oklahoma and the PS Bowl. Yeah.
Well, I guess the other games were okay. I did not think that the Iowa State-Oregon game was anything scintillating. I watched it, but I kind of lost interest in it.
Yeah, because Iowa State dominated that game, but I mean, Oregon, the Pac-12 was garbage this year.
Wait a minute. You think that the North Carolina-Texas A&M game was worse than the Oklahoma-Florida game?
Well, I mean, competitive-wise, no, but I'm saying because for some reason the A&M game just didn't draw my attention when the matchup was at that level. So I turned it on fourth quarter. It was competitive, but on defense there were so many opt-outs, so I couldn't take it seriously.
Before those opt-outs came out, when it was just announced, that was my favorite game.
Oh yeah, mine too. But then after the opt-outs came out, then I lost all the interest in it. Though.
And I would have loved to have seen a legitimate Florida-Oklahoma game. That would have been fun.
Yeah, I still think Oklahoma wins that game. Florida was overrated this year.
Well, I tend to agree with you. I don't know. I don't know who would have won the game. None of us know, but I tend to think Oklahoma would have won the game.
Yeah, I mean, that was the least competitive game among all. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, the game was a joke. It was treated as a joke by Florida and even Dan Mullen.
Yeah, I mean. So, thanks, Mark. Thanks for taking my call.
Appreciate the call. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Christ Savior. Had an issue with my glasses. No more glasses. Don't have any glasses. Got to go get new glasses. Okay. And then with the loss of the insurance policy, so I still have medical insurance. I lost my dental and my optical. So I've got to look into that. But lost the glasses. No glasses. The glasses just deteriorated on me. They're just gone. They just one part of the frame fell apart than the other part of the frame. And they're gone. They're in oblivion. They're gone. So need to schedule an eye appointment, but need to take care of that at some point. So I blow up this screen like beyond recognition that you could imagine. Just blow up the screen to like the top level of the eye chart so I can read, but I didn't do it large enough for Christ Savior 888. Thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution, Christ Savior. Thank you so much. You've got an amazing handle, by the way. I am all for that. But thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. These shows in this channel is all based on individual contributions and hopefully potential sponsorships out there. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, this is Lee in Ann Arbor. I called last week.
Hey, Lee.
And I'm calling back this week because I'm ready to talk a little Michigan football.
All right, let's go to it. Let me get ready for that. I got my Michigan helmet right over my right shoulder, too. Here we go.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, obviously, I have a couple questions here, so I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it, I guess. I don't hate the contract extension with Harbaugh just because I was obviously so excited when he was hired and the expectations were sky high. But I just kind of want to ask you about what, kind of an outsider's perspective on what should the expectations be this year for Michigan. You're retaining Gaddis, even though he hasn't really established a flow offensively. But yet, Don Brown's out the door. A lot of people wanted him out a couple of years ago. You're bringing in a young gun linebackers coach from the Ravens to be the D coordinator. I like the hire of Mike Hart as the running back coach to bring a little bit more of a Michigan guy who knows about the rivalries, who knows about what it takes to play for Michigan, play for Lloyd Carr, etc. So I almost feel like this offseason has been tugging me in multiple different directions. And with this past season going the way that it went, and with Michigan, probably the most embarrassing season of Michigan football I've experienced. I was born in 97. I've been a Michigan football fan as long as I can remember. Obviously, I remember the App State game, but I was pretty young. And this past season, I was absolutely just demolished as a fan. I got to a point where I wasn't even watching the games anymore. And then we're coming into this next year. I understand there's a buyout clause in the contract. I guess it's only right to expect 8 wins, but part of me wants to raise the bar even higher because of how last year went and the changes that are being made. It's almost like the expectations need to be higher in order for Michigan to achieve more than their average output that they've been putting up the past few years.
All right, so first I'm going to address my perspective or perception of what their expectations are, and then I'm going to move on to my expectations. So there was a statement made by Ward Manuel when he announced the new contract. As you well know, it was stated in the first line that we believe that Jim is the man to deliver championships at Michigan, and that will be the standard. Okay, so is that the standard right out of the gate? Or is that going to be the standard as evaluated 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road? I don't know that. So I don't know how much of a hot seat he's on. I don't know if they just basically said, hey, we want to start afresh. He's being paid way too much money just automatically. He needs to prove it. He needs to pull through for us. So we need to restructure this. But we are in no way going to hold him to some championship standard based on what we watched on the field last year. That's unreasonable to expect that this year. Or they might be saying, hey, we don't mind if we need to push him out the door, and we just were able to figure out a way to do it at a economic way. And therefore, if he shocks us and goes 11-1, then great for him and great for us, and we'll continue. But otherwise, we know he's going to fail to meet these championship standards, and then we'll fire him after 1 year and hope that somebody's available that we want. So I don't know. What I'm guessing is that their expectations a little bit more somewhere in the middle, that they're going to expect significant improvement, but not necessarily hold him to a championship standard in year 1 or year 7, as it were. And that would be my assessment of the situation, and that would also be my approach to the situation. I know that many Michigan fans won't agree with me, but I still generally think that this guy's capable. And I think that there's an overestimation as to what Michigan's accomplished in the last 20 years of football. If people really went back and looked. So he significantly upgraded the product out of the gate. Then he flatlined, and now it's declining. So I think they're an 8-4 football team. When I look at what happened this past season, they look more like a 4-8 football team, but I know better than that. their talent and getting adjusted to new coaches, a new defensive coordinator, all of that. When I put it all together against, I haven't looked at the schedule, but what is against a typical Big Ten schedule with a tough non-conference game, that they're an 8-4 football team. That would be my expectation. Now, my expectation, if I was hiring or rehiring Jim Harbaugh, would be that within 2022, 23, that he's got to beat Ohio State and win the Big Ten championship.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I just feel like from where I'm sitting, it seems like there's kind of an air of entitlement in the halls of Schembechler Hall. And there's somewhere along the way in the Harbaugh era, that entitlement accelerated to a point of no return almost. And we've only seen the guy, I mean, it looks like he's aged about 15 years. I know you've probably heard this before. I think he takes losses really, really hard. And I think he takes these Ohio State losses especially hard. And I think that this is a guy who, I don't think this is the same Jim Harbaugh that we had, in 2015 or whenever it was that he got hired. I think this is a different coach. I think this is a guy who's been kind of bruised and battered from his experience at Michigan. And like you were talking about, how it obviously was going uphill at the beginning and then it kind of peaked and now it's declining. I just don't see how the iteration of Jim Harbaugh that we have right now is going to steer the ship back towards, playing for the winged helmet and playing prideful football. Because that's not what I was watching last year, and it was most notable last year. That these Michigan players, this is deeper than Harbaugh, man. This is a culture issue. This is intrinsically, these guys are not putting enough effort out on the field to be worthy to be playing football for Michigan. Specifically in the Michigan State game, specifically in the Indiana game, specifically in the Wisconsin game, two of which are at home. And I know you're not playing in front of fans, but it's embarrassing, man, how many people really care about this program. And then you see a guy, again, you've heard this before too, a guy like Matt Campbell this offseason, whose name is circling around Ann Arbor. And this is a guy who built Iowa State into, a formidable Big 12 contender on a regular basis. And I'm not necessarily saying that Matt Campbell is the answer to all of my prayers as a Michigan fan, but seeing someone who's young, energetic, a culture builder, and who holds his players accountable, that excites me. And I just don't really feel like Harbaugh is that guy. And I think that maybe he lost himself somewhere along the way, through one of those tough losses to Ohio State, tallying years off his life. And I just think that, I don't know, I'm getting pulled in a couple directions here, because coming into this offseason, I kind of wanted Harbaugh gone. But with the moves they've made, I like that they replaced Don Brown. I like that they bring Mike Harden, like I said. But then you got a guy like Josh Gaddis, who I was really excited when he came in, having experience at Penn State and Alabama. But this is a guy who I don't really know if in the modern day college football, especially if you're trying to contest for the Big Ten, trying to make a playoff, you have to have a fairly potent offense. And you have to have a lot of these schools you see, like Joe Brady and LSU getting an NFL job last year, even Ryan Day, you guys got at Ohio State. These are great play callers. Steve Sarkisian going to Texas from Alabama. It's almost like a trend in college football now, where in order to be a playoff contender, you need to have a really good play caller on top of offensive, firepower. And I don't really know if Gaddis is that guy. So I'm kind of getting tugged in a couple different directions here, and I don't really know how to feel or what the expectation is. But if I get another 8-win year out of Harbaugh, I can't really say I'm going to be content with that next year at all.
You shouldn't be. So here's my thought about all that, is that basically my two thoughts coming out of this contract is that if you really looked at news conferences and what is stated by ADs when they hire football coaches, there are championship aspirations thrown out all over the place. Shoot, they hire coaches at middling programs in the Power 5, and they will make comments about, we aspire to win championships. So I want to see Michigan actually hold Harbaugh to that standard, because they're going to have to go through an elite program to win a championship. So I want to see them hold him to that standard, number one. Number two, to your point, and I've said this a zillion times, that yes, the Jim Harbaugh that we saw at San Diego, Stanford, and with the San Francisco 49ers, and that we saw take over Michigan, I've not seen that guy for the last few years. You said it more passionately and more thoroughly than I'll be able to do it. So you've already done it. But I've stated the same thing that you just did a few minutes ago countless times about what I see out of him and the vibe I get from him. I think if you're talking about losses taking anything out of him, it had to be more than any other game. And I'm sure it's been a slow grind, of course. It wasn't been one game, but if the leading game in that downfall has to be that 2018 Ohio State game. Like the 2016 game was a turning point, but we didn't know it at the time. But it was a turning point because who knows what happens. They win that game, they get the measurement, they win the game, they go win the Big Ten championship game, most likely against Wisconsin. They're in the playoff. Maybe they get trucked in the playoff, but they go to the playoff. I don't think they would have. I think they would have been okay. I don't think they would have won the national championship, but they would have had a Big Ten championship under Harbaugh. They would have had a playoff appearance, and maybe they go lose in the playoff 31-20, and it's a decent game, and there's nothing embarrassing about it. They made the playoff, and he's got that in his second season. Who knows what in the world would have transpired after that had that gone his way. Okay, so that's not his fault. That's just one of those knocks you got to suffer in life. So I don't feel sorry for him, but it is a fork in the road in life, and it didn't work out for him. And it had nothing to do with his team not being good enough or not being prepared. They were the better team on the field that day. They just were. But they didn't make the plays when they needed to, and they missed out on a measurement that who knows if it was correct or not.
That's just ball sometimes.
Yep. 2 years later, and I stated this a zillion times, if you look at their body of work and Ohio State's body of work, they both came into that final game 10-1, but Michigan was the superior team. If you take their common opponents, Michigan beat every common opponent much worse than Ohio State. They were just better. And 2018, they walk out on the field and they get annihilated. And maybe he just left that game thinking, what is going on? What do I have to do? We were the better team the whole season, and this happened. And then by the next season, 2019, suddenly Ohio State's off and running, and they're, the dust is just spewing at Harbaugh in Michigan. Ohio State's miles ahead now. Even though Michigan was decent in 2018, Ohio State's gone. That was another turning point that just left them in the dust. And maybe between kind of that late 2018 going into 2019, he at some point threw up his hands figuratively and was like, what do I have to do? I don't have any more answers.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. And I'll be interested to see kind of how things go this year, but I will put an emphasis on wanting to see the coaching staff offensively put their players in better positions to succeed. Because obviously I know Joe Milton wasn't a world beater, and I had high expectations coming in for him, but I think he's got a lot of talent. And I think a lot of the reasons why, outside of his inaccuracy and inconsistency, I think a lot of the reasons why things didn't work out offensively is because I never really got a sense of flow from the play caller. And sometimes you can just feel it when there's a sense of flow and things are going right. And every time it seemed like there was going to be a sense of flow from Michigan, some play was called or someone got subbed out or something happened that completely interrupted the flow. And I just really hope that Gaddis is learning from his mistakes because, this is going to be the biggest year of his career, obviously. And to be quite frank, I'm surprised they didn't replace him with someone whose prospects are a little bit more promising as a play caller. After kind of what resume he put out there on film the past couple of years. But I appreciate your time, Mark.
Thanks, Lee. Have a good one. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you too.
Number of people calling during our conversation on Michigan football with Lee, so we invite you in to call us. Give us a call at 860-325-3687.
The call will start at the beep.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Did you release a way too early top 10 for next season, by the way, Mark?
Well, for one thing, David, you should know that I go way beyond the top 10. I'm not a top 10 guy. I go with the top 25. It's funny you say that. I've got notes in my hand right here. Here they are.
Yeah.
And I am in the process of delivering a way too early top 25.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I figured in between all that time that you're designing new playoff models, you might have come up with
Got to do that
a
too.
preseason top 20 or top 25 going into next year. Just a couple thoughts, by the way, on a few different things. I got a chance to yesterday. I don't know if you watched it, but did you see Urban Meyer's press conference to open up as Jacksonville Jaguars head coach?
I did not. I would like to, and we'll probably go back and watch that. I'll have to take note of that. I did not, though.
I found it interesting because, in his press conference, I saw him get asked early on, and maybe he was asked, I didn't see all of the press conference, I saw kind of the first few questions he got. So I didn't get a chance to see it in its entirety. But at least seeing the first few questions he got, he seemed to, the first question he got about the health, which was the question that I had, obvious question he was going to get is, what about your health? That was the reason you stepped down 2 years ago. He totally seemed to evade and dodge the question. It really didn't come out and say, oh, I'm better, or oh, I've, gotten clearance from my doctors or something like that. He really didn't give a clear answer. It really seemed like a dodge when he got the question. At least that's what I noticed.
Yeah, so we had Pat Murphy from Bucknuts on here, and we went over the Urban Meyer situation, and he said that Urban Meyer responded with something like, we're just going to monitor my health. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, did that seem like a dodge to you?
Absolutely, that's a dodge. Like, it was very specific, and you probably remember it better than I do in terms of what the prognosis was and concerning the cysts and how they affected him. All of this was detailed when he stepped down. And so for him not to be, and I'm not surprised, it's not like he's the only one who dodges a question like that. And maybe it's legit. Maybe they're dealing with the cysts in these particular ways, and he just doesn't want to talk about it. I don't know.
I found it interesting. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but, I just had to point that out because, he's obviously going to get the question. And, again, maybe I shouldn't be surprised at all. By the way, he did make mention that he would not be rating Ohio State for their coaches. And their strength and conditioning coach who he brought in, and I believe their recruiting coordinator, hopefully there's a good chance he sticks around as well. He does an excellent job. So I think that would be encouraging. Although I think most Buckeye fans might want to see Kerry Combs after the national title game performance. But
do we know how much money he's making?
Who's that?
I looked it up and I couldn't find it. Urban Meyer.
Oh yeah, I thought it was it? Oh, I mean, it had to be well over $10 million a year. I don't know the exact number, Mark. No, I don't.
Okay.
I thought I saw like he got a certain amount of years too. Which I'm sure they're going to give him a certain amount of time to build up that roster. But
I'm still a little
I
fascinated in his decision to go to the next level. And I see if everything works out well, I see how that enhances a reputation, a legacy. If you can do it on both levels, my goodness, there's very few that can do that. And he had a more accomplished career by far than Jimmy Johnson did at the college level. And, we talked about Pete Carroll the other day, and certainly Urban Meyer, he exceeds Pete Carroll at the college level. So if he's able to win, let's say a Super Bowl, because that's the standard. Everybody just wants to hear, did he win a Super Bowl? Let's say he wins one. If he wins a Super Bowl, he's in a unique category if he's successful to any degree. But if he wins a Super Bowl, he's at the head of that list because he's more successful than those other two guys in college.
Right.
Well, Pete Carroll, I'm sorry, David. I just want to finish my point. I apologize for pausing there. But Pete Carroll certainly did more than just win a Super Bowl in Seattle. He's had extended success. So you could go either way on that. It would, by some measurements, take a lot to succeed Pete Carroll's overall body of work.
Yeah, I think Pete Carroll, kind of learned from his first pro experience. I always felt what Pete Carroll did was a little bit shady when he left USC, to be perfectly honest, Mark. I think he got out when he knew that everything was going to hit the fan, if you know what I mean, Mark. Sure. I still feel that to this day.
Yep.
And I think he got with a good organization. I think that was helpful. Obviously, the Jimmy Johnson situation, Mark, you no longer were a Cowboys fan at that point, right?
No, as soon as they fired Tom Landry, I was done. I didn't care that Jimmy Johnson won 2 Super Bowls. That meant nothing to me.
Right.
That did not bring me back on the bandwagon. No. I'm not that kind of fan.
Okay. Well, you stuck to your guns. That's a good thing. I mean, it's just, interesting that they had their maybe their greatest teams, in that 90s period of time with him. And, of course, Switzer came in and won one with basically Jimmy's team. But,
sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think Urban can do a good job. The one situation that he did say that was obvious, which is the biggest attraction, they're going to get the number 1 pick. They've got draft picks coming there. They've got salary cap space. So they're well positioned to, hopefully build up that roster. Well, hopefully for them, build up that roster within the next 2-3 years through the draft. And then, of course, in the NFL, if you have your quarterback, at any level, if you have your quarterback, you're always going to be in good shape.
David, did he actually say that was one of the main reasons why he took the job, because they had that draft pick?
Yeah, having the number 1 pick, that was a big draw for him.
Really?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, he's been a big Trevor Lawrence fan.
I guess. But still, think about this, David. Go through NFL drafts. The same awful teams, for the most part, there are some exceptions, continue to draft in the top 2 or 3 at the NFL draft. They're bad organizations. Why do you want to go coach for one of them?
I hear what you're saying, Mark. I think that, it's interesting because Jacksonville was good about 4 years ago. I think they were in 2017, they were 1 bad quarter away from going to the Super Bowl.
Absolutely.
And then their team totally went downhill after that,
And I'm not saying that to say that Jacksonville's a bad organization. I'm just saying I don't have enough knowledge of their current situation to make an evaluation. But I'm just saying that you can continue to see the Jets and the Browns, and of course the Browns have moved into a different era possibly with this breakthrough season, but forever the Bengals, the Browns, the Jets, on and on. The Redskins have been awful forever. For those teams to be picking in the top 5 of the NFL draft, and it doesn't help them because they're bad organizations. And meanwhile, the Packers and the Patriots and the Saints and those teams pick at the bottom and they continue to win. Well, of course, I picked out 3 teams with 3 of the best quarterbacks of all time.
Right. That helps. And that's what I'm saying, Mark. He's been a big Trevor Lawrence fan. And, and everybody's basically saying Trevor Lawrence is the best, pro prospect. That's what people are saying since either Peyton Manning or John Elway.
So I think there is great excitement there. I don't think he's taking Justin Fields. I don't think there's any doubt they're taking Lawrence.
Yep.
So, I think that I mean, for a guy that most, football observers feel is going to be this next great quarterback, and certainly Urban seems to see that. And they have, I think 4 other draft picks within the first 2 rounds of the draft. They have salary cap space. So I think he sees the possibility of A, having a, possibly generational quarterback, and B, being able to fill up the roster with, salary cap money and the other draft picks that they have at their disposal. Now, can he build up a good coaching staff like he did in college at Ohio State and Florida? It succeed in the NFL? I don't know. He did say that the difficult part's going to be dealing with 5 or 6 losses in a season and calling that a good season. And they're probably going to have a lot more than that maybe in his first year or 2.
Yeah, he better get used to 12 the first year.
Right.
All right, David, I'm going to take some of these other calls, but I appreciate the call.
All right, Mark. Take care.
Oh, I lost him. Had about 3 people calling, so just call on back. Chuck C., thank you so much for the super chat. Chuck C., you are a consistent contributor. We appreciate that. It's amazing what you do. Thanks, Mark. Transfer portal and early on-campus guys really throw predictions into a quandary. Texas A&M blown 3 wins. FSU up 3. Gotcha. Meaning, okay.
The call will start in the
So let me address this comment by Chuck C. So basically, I was talking about how a significant drop or gain in wins for a particular college football season to me is 3 games. And that's what I was measuring Athlon's, Lindy's, and Street and Smith's by. How many teams in college football in the Power 5 either gain or decrease by 3 wins in a particular season-to-season comparison? And it's right around 19, which when you look at it, that's significant. There's only about 65 Power 5 teams. 19 of them, little less than a third, either increase by 3 games or decrease by 3 wins. So that's going to be impossible, generally impossible for us to determine next year, because these teams played 6 games, 7 games, 9 games, 11 games. They're all over the place. Arizona State, 3 games. So that determination is almost impossible for this next year, unfortunately. But Chuck C. is basically saying that Texas A&M is going to be 3 games worse this year. So they went 8-1. So I would think, what is that, 8-4? And then Florida State is going to be gaining 3 wins. So Florida State went 3-6. What's gaining 3 wins? Go 6-6, I guess. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
The guy who's going to have the best college football site and the guy who's going to have the best gear coming out before the season starts. How you doing?
Oh, my goodness. That's a lot to shoot for, but we're doing our best. Michael, how are you? And I reached out to some Purdue folks, by the way. So hopefully we get some Purdue writers on here.
Not too bad. Hope you're having a good Saturday. Hey, I got a question. I know we're still about 7 months away from college football, but guys put a certain coach's feet to the fire early before the season starts.
Go to it.
I think this is because here it is. So no defensive coordinator. I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, run down board card. You got to have stuff go through the transfer protocol. But I got to put Jeff Brom's feet to the fire. Yeah, they've had injuries in 2019 and then a couple bad losses last year, but they were mostly competitive. But I just got to think this is his 4th year, and I hope something better happens in last 2 years. I kind of want to see quasi 2017 season. I just wanted to get your thoughts.
Is this going to be his 4th year or his 5th year? I thought 2017 was his.
Sorry.
Yeah, 2017 was his first year.
5th year.
Yeah, this is going to be his 5th year.
5th year.
So basically what he's given us is 7-6 with a bowl win, 6-7 with a bowl loss, 4-8, correct? And then whatever they were this year that didn't much, 2-4. And actually, I thought they played good football out of the gate this year. I was, they they beat Iowa. I'm trying to think of their early games. Anyway, I watched them play several times early. They beat Nebraska.
They lost the controversial game in Minnesota.
Yes,
That's when the
I
rail
watched
came
that
off.
game. Yep. And then they lost to some teams I did not expect them to lose to late, including Rutgers, correct?
Rutgers.
On a last-second field goal.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, regardless of what happened. Yeah. So for me,
go ahead.
they need to, at the minimum, I'd like to see them go 6-6 and win a bowl game.
I'm going better. I want to do hell of a whole higher. I want to see 8-4.
8-4. Do we know what that schedule looks like? Are the schedules out? Can we pull up the Purdue schedule?
Yes, we need to pull it up.
I want to see this baby. I'm going to give it a look myself here. 8-4 at Purdue this year.
Yeah.
I know they play a team called Ohio State. Okay, I got it right in front of me too. I got it here for you, Michael. Here we go. Oregon State out of the gate. So that's no give me. Taking on the Beavers there. Much improved team, but it is at home. UConn on the road. Of course, they have to win that game. At Notre Dame. They've got a tough non-conference schedule, Michael.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. They got to go 2-1 out of conference. If they lose that Oregon State game.
I think they win the Oregon State game, the UConn game, but lose at Notre Dame.
Yeah, that's what I would guess. But I'm just saying that Oregon State game's not a gimme. So if they're 1-2, then trouble. They got to beat Illinois. Okay, then they got all the usual. Let's see who they've got out of the East. They've got Ohio State on the road, Michigan State, and Indiana. So they've got to face the Buckeyes and the Hoosiers. Of course, they got Indiana as the old Oak and Bucket game. They get a bye before they got to go to Iowa. Okay, let's say they lose to Notre Dame. Let's say they lose in Columbus to the Buckeyes. Let's say those are two not automatic losses, but close to automatic losses. Then out of Indiana, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Northwestern, they can only lose to two of them and then not get upset by anybody. Yeah, that's a pretty high bar. If he's able to go 8-4 against that schedule,
then we're 7-5.
7-5, yeah. That's a tough schedule.
I maybe see them going 7-3 into the Wisconsin game. I'll put it like this, Mark. Would I be crazy to say of the last year game between Wisconsin, Northwestern, IU, they can easily lose 2 or win all 3?
Oh, sure. They're all winnable. They're all losable. Now, I'll give you percentages, though. They're going to Camp Randall. So as things stand right now, and of course, we're going to have football to evaluate between then and now. But right now, as it stands, I'm giving them about a 30% chance to win at Wisconsin and about a 40% chance at Northwestern. And then Indiana at home's more of a 50-50 game, or maybe slightly against them. It's more likely that they lose all 3 than they win all 3. I don't think there's any question about that.
But the thing is, though, I know it's still early, but is Mertz still going to be the quarterback for Wisconsin next year?
Yes.
Now, what about for Northwestern? Who's taking
wow.
Ramsey's place?
That's a great question. That is a tremendous question. I don't know why Peyton Ramsey's leaving Northwestern. I don't get it.
Unless he had to leave after, I think he was at IU for 5 years, but I'm not sure.
Okay. All right.
I could be wrong about that.
Wow. I think that they're going to, I'm looking at 2, 3. I'm looking at 6-6.
Because usually that IU game is a good game. like I said and stuff like that. With Penix, I mean, because most likely he's going to have trouble for the majority of the season. And if IU up to a decent start, how is that going to mess up his chemistry with IU, especially with Tuttle? Tom Allen decides to say, okay, here you go, Michael, the team's yours again. Jack, thanks for your help and stuff. Or do you think he'll keep Tuttle at the quarterback spot?
I didn't see enough of Jack Tuttle to make an evaluation on myself. I think he's talented.
Because you know you got Penix coming back from the ACL injury.
Sure. Well, he's the guy.
Do what?
Well, he's the guy. Is there any reason to believe that he can't come back?
Well, no, it's not that. It's just if IU's having a good season next year, would you want to mess up everything that's going on with bringing it? See, that's the only thing I'm trying. I mean, but that's the decision Tom Allen's going to have to make, though. I mean, Penix is having a good season. I mean, not Penix. Total's having a great season. Penix is cleared. What are you going to do? I mean, how do you? Because you don't want to mess up the chemistry of a team, do you? Or do you think because obviously Penix might not be able to work with the new receivers because since failure is come, I think. What's his name is still there? Tyler, I can't say his name is escaping me up to
Freifogel.
You know what? Yeah, Freifogel. I think he'll still be back next year, but I know failure's gone though.
Yes. I'm not understanding your point. We expect so Penix got hurt in what, mid-November?
Yeah, late November. He was in the Maryland game.
Yeah. You know, there are thoughts that De'Ara King is going to be back, and I know they're not the same injury, but I think the severity is roughly the same. They might be the same injury. That De'Ara King's going to be back for week 1, and he got hurt in the bowl game. You know, he got hurt a month later, over a month later.
All right, now I was wondering, because I got Purdue going maybe 7-5 rating for next year. I was just wondering stuff like that. All right, Mark. Like I said, I can't wait for the stuff to come out this year into the website.
Absolutely.
Weekend, man.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate that.
Bye-bye. Okay, bye-bye.
For some reason, Michael's very concerned that I get going on a website, which I am too. Can't be reliant on YouTube forever. So we need to get on that, and we're in the process of working that out. We have an individual out there who hopefully has been a godsend. It looks like he has. So. All right. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
How you doing this afternoon, Mark?
I'm good. What's going on?
Well, just wanted to just bring to all the listeners' attention the dreaded word, and the word is parity. And that's what the theme for the 21-22 season will be, parity.
Okay.
And as far as my top 4 going into the season, Mark, if you'll indulge, will be Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, and Oklahoma. And the reason why I have to have 2 SEC schools, and and full disclosure, I'm not going to say, hey, yes, I'm born and raised as far as Alabama, live in Georgia, but that notwithstanding, it's just a matter just simply, I think that when it's all said and done, you look at how the schedule plays out. Clemson, Georgia, first game. So that game will be I guess you can say, a pre-test. And then as the season goes on, Georgia wouldn't possibly lose another game unless they would play Alabama as far as in the SEC championship. And then as far as Clemson's concerned, the winner or loser of that game, if Clemson loses to Georgia, okay. But if for whatever reason Clemson wins, then we know that they're going to win pretty much outright. But the one thing that you'll find that 3 of those top 4 schools will have over Alabama will be staff continuity as well as a returning quarterback. Or a returning quarterback and or a quarterback with experience going into the upcoming season.
Sure. Okay. Well, my thoughts are that Clemson-Georgia game, people are going to look at that game as just a battle of 2 playoff contenders, of course. And unless somebody whips the other team, they're both going to get a mulligan for that game in a sense. In regards to if that's a great game, that's a 38-35 game that we all anticipate. And, we're sitting there 3 months later and it's sometime in November and let's say Clemson wins the game.
All right.
Then Georgia's going to have the one loss, but it's not going to be really considered in the rankings as a loss. If Clemson's as good as we think they're going to be, let's say they're riding high in the ACC and they're sitting there at 8-9-0, and Georgia's got one loss and it's to Clemson, 38-35 in a great game, then that loss isn't even going to be. It's not even going to count as a loss based on the way the committee looks at things and the pollsters. What's going to be interesting is if Georgia beats Clemson. Let's say we have a scenario that we've seen a few times before. Georgia has a great season. They beat Clemson, but they lose to Alabama in the SEC championship game, and Clemson's marching on to a playoff game. But Georgia's sitting there basically saying, well, we've got the same record, and we know that we didn't win the SEC, but we beat Clemson head-to-head. That Clemson win is going to be paramount to the SEC getting in 2 teams. Potentially going to be huge.
But once again, Mark, that's the old question. Are we going to do as far as what is right? Or are we going to do as far as what, quote, media or what the masses outside of the Southeast want?
Okay.
If you go by as far as what's right, then you can have 2 SEC schools with that scenario.
Well, we've already had that.
What the other 40 states say, then hey, that won't happen.
Well, wait a minute. So I just want to get your definition here, because when you say what's right, what do you mean what's right?
Okay, well, what's right, just in the respect, okay, say, for instance, as you stated, Clemson defeats Georgia that first game, and then Georgia wins outright and loses to, say, we'll just say Alabama as far as SEC championship game. Now, that will give them 2 losses. But then, let me pose this to you, Mark, and that would be, are we looking at, say, for instance, a 9-2 strong schedule or a 10-1 respectively weak schedule?
Well, to me, going 9-2. So again, they're going to be at 12 games if they play a full season. So we'll say 10-2 or 11-1. All right. Let's get back to the evaluation of the teams. So for me, I go into every season, just like everybody else, with a perception of how good these teams and conferences are. So I will go into next season thinking the SEC is the best conference. And the Big Ten's probably the second best conference, but I'm not totally convinced. But they probably are the second best conference. And then the other 3, I can make all sorts of arguments, especially after Notre Dame leaves the ACC. But I know that the SEC is the best conference, and I'm pretty sure the Big Ten is the second best conference, and on and on and on. And the other 3, I would have to sit here with pen and paper and really diagnose it. But also, I know that what I attempt to do is erase all that out of my thought process and just say, okay, in week 1, and I don't know what the Big 9 conference games are next year, but I'm just throwing games out that have been played in the past. I know that LSU is going to play Texas, and I know Ohio State's playing Oregon, and I know Auburn's going to play Washington or whatever. And that's going to be a huge determining factor in my evaluation of these conferences, is how they perform in big non-conference games against the other conferences. So if the SEC goes out there and takes care of business, as they typically do, then I'm going to be like, okay, well, everything I thought going into the season is true. Not that I'm going to hold them to some ridiculous standard that they got to win every non-conference game, but if, like we've seen in the last 5 years, Alabama's gone out and they've beaten Wisconsin and Michigan and West Virginia and Louisville and Duke, well, those shouldn't count, but you know that they've cleaned up on those the big non-conference game that they scheduled, Florida State in 2017. And then Auburn's gone out and they've beaten Oregon and Washington the last 2 years in non-conference play. And those continue to line up. And again, they don't have to win every game, but okay, they just went 8-3 in very tough, difficult games. Well, that's backing up my perception that the SEC is the best conference. They just went out and proved it. But if they go out there and stumble, then I'm going to say, you know what? We need to evaluate these conferences based on what they're doing on the field, not based on what we know about recruiting rankings. And if the SEC starts tripping up in these games, then I'll be like, okay, well, we need to evaluate these conferences based on what they're showing us. And that's in my mind, the only measurement we've got to go on is how they perform against each other. The SEC against the Big Ten and the ACC, all the conferences against each other. That's our main barometer.
That is true. I can't argue with you on that, Mark. But I don't want, as far as the fan, to have to deal with. Let me rephrase that, John. I'm not going to say the fans, but just as far as don't want us to deal with what we dealt with in part this past season. Because really, when it came to the 4th seed, I have to be honest with you, Mark, I was shaky about that.
Yep.
And it proved out. As far as the Ohio State part of it, I didn't have an issue with it. The only issue that I had was just a matter of, if you make rules, you can't, as the old saying goes, move the goal line. And I think that's what the Big Ten did. So that's my only qualms with
Absolutely, they did. So here are my counterpoints to what you just said, and a lot of it backs up what you said. I totally agree. Anybody that would come on here and say, even after the playoffs over and Ohio State won impressively one game and lost decidedly another game, anybody who comes on here and says Ohio State didn't deserve to be in the playoff, not because they weren't good enough, but because they didn't play enough games, I have no argument with that. I think that that's a legitimate point. Now, the argument I will make is that guys like Jimbo Fisher were out there saying, we shouldn't be letting teams that only play 6 games in the playoff. Okay, well, where's that dividing line? Is it magically just at 9 games because your team played 9 games? They didn't play 11 like Alabama. They didn't play 11 like Clemson. They didn't play 11 like Notre Dame. So why is your team eligible playing 9 games when that's only 3 more than 6, and these other teams played 2 more than your team? So why is that legit? You know why it's legit? Because Jimbo Fisher's team played 9 games. That's why his team played enough games, but Ohio State didn't.
Exactly. But Mark, once again, I believe that the theme for this season will be parity. And if you have strong quarterback play coming into the season, and if you have I would say, above average defense, which I mean that term is relative now, because above average defense will be, if you can hold a team to doggone, say, 28 points. So that's the one, if I can wear my crimson and white hat for a moment, that's what I believe is going to be the calling card to start off the season for the University of Alabama, is number 1, the defense, and also, and I know this may anger some of your Cane fans, but I do believe that I believe it will be over credited scrimmage as far as that first game versus University of Miami.
Yeah.
So that'll be an opportunity as far as to get Bryce Young to get his legs under him, because when you look at the season, if you just pretty much flip-flopping in schedule, you're going to have your LSU at home, but as far as all the other difficult, relatively speaking, games like A&M, Auburn, Tennessee, maybe Mississippi State, those will be road games. So a good opportunity as far as but when it's all said and done, Mark, I mean, that's why, Dave and Saban get paid the big bucks, because, you got to go out there and beat the pass as far as recruiting. But along those lines, I believe that the only reason why I'm giving pretty much that is anyone possibly can win it this year is simply because of really one thing, and that is once again, every 4 years when it comes to University of Alabama, as far as staff turnover. And that if there was not going to be any staff turnover as far as the season, at the conclusion of this past season, then I would say back to back unequivocally. But the thing is, because of the changing chairs around the table, it's going to be it's going to be difficult. And once again, the University of Alabama is experiencing what they experience every 4 years. And that is because of winning on the field. Your assistant's going, but not only are your assistants leaving, But hey, they're taking chairs when they move.
Well, when you say that there's going to be parity and that anybody can win it, when you say anybody, you're talking about like 5 teams,
Well, okay,
right?
I apologize. Let me preface that, Mark, by saying those 4.
Okay.
Those 4 that I named earlier, as far as Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma, Clemson. I don't see any team out of those 4 winning.
Okay, so you think those are the 4 best teams in the country going into next year, and they're all capable of winning it, and nobody else?
Yes, sir. And the reason why I say that, Mark, is just simply of those 4 teams, 3 of them have either returning quarterbacks or quarterbacks with experience.
Sure.
The only one that doesn't, obviously, is Alabama.
Okay, I can't. That's certainly a huge factor in winning is quarterback play and quarterback experience and having a great coach. And of course, those programs are always in it to begin with, so the coaching isn't really under question. Okay.
And also the recruiting, what you're aware of, Mark, the recruiting dynamic. As far as 3 of those 4 schools recruit at a very, very high level. They don't believe in just having. If we have a strong 44 players, they want to have a strong 85.
Absolutely, and even Oklahoma is not far behind. They're usually I think they had the 7th best class in the country this year. What currently stands in for the 2021 class. So your concern, it sounds like, is are we going to select the 4 best teams? Or are we going to select 4 other teams, or is one team going to make it in that really isn't one of the 4 best?
Exactly, because look at it. And Mark, I'm 54, so I'm gonna say I have a few birthdays on you. When it comes to, say, for instance, the name of Notre Dame, would it be safe to say that the name of Notre Dame really only holds any, as the old folks would say, remembrance when it comes to those that are, say, maybe 40 and up or 50 and up, as far as those kids that are mostly as far as I'm just saying kids, that 30 and under group, do they really have the same connection to Notre Dame that, say, a person that is 50 and up?
Well, if I'm following you, we're talking about playoff selections, and there's 13 people that decide who makes the playoff, and I don't know that they're necessarily impressed with Notre Dame.
Well, Mark, if that's the case, then hating to be the Saturday afternoon quarterback, but if that wasn't the case, then how in the world they got in it?
Well, this is what I did. And sir, I apologize. I forgot your name off the top. I always like to address people by Kevin. Yeah. So this is what I did. I don't know how long you've been watching me, but this is what I did at the end of the season after the conference championship games. Is, of course, as you can imagine, we did a call-in show right after the last conference championship game. And we're sitting here Saturday night, and what do you think every phone call was? Mark, who are the 4 teams that need to make it? And I said, because I need to answer questions on the phone, I'll tell you who my 4 are, but to be honest, I don't know this second who the 4th team should be, because if I was part of that committee or if I was the person deciding it, I know the 3 that I'm selecting, the 3 obvious ones. They're in, but I would need to sit down and evaluate Texas A&M, Notre Dame, Cincinnati, and Oklahoma. And that's what I did for my own rankings. And I released my own rankings the next morning. And I sat here after I got done with the call-in show, and I went through and I listed Texas A&M, and I went game by game by game. And I went in order in terms of their most impressive win, their second most impressive win, their third, and I listed them. And I compared each team and how well I thought that they played and how impressive they were in wins, or how egregious their losses were to an extent. And I gave Notre Dame a slight edge over Texas A&M, and that's why I ranked them number 4. But I certainly don't have any issue with anybody who says Texas A&M should have been in the playoff over Notre Dame. But Notre Dame had 2 more wins, 10-1 versus 8-1. And I thought in beating Clemson on the road, or not on the road, at home, even though Clemson was compromised at quarterback and 3 defensive players out, that it's still a top 7 or 8 win in the country. And I went from there, and I matched up the wins, and I gave Notre Dame an edge over Texas A&M.
Understand, no argument, Mark. It's just that other than yourself, most pundits stated they used one word, and that is iconic and brand.
Yeah, I don't care about that.
That should not have been a factor when it came to
absolutely. It should
or really any school for that matter.
It should only be about how good is the team on the field. Absolutely. And so you believe Texas A&M was the best team, the fourth best team, or should have been the final selection?
I knew that once that the ACC championship game was played, that I didn't think Notre Dame could drop any lower than number 4.
Yep.
So I mean, that's pretty much a given. I mean, and even if Notre Dame they would have won, I don't think Clemson was still going to be in the top 4. So the only thing that was just really an issue or a question, I should say, was just more so whether they were going to hold against Ohio State the few games that they played. Because if you just go simply by rosters and you go by depth, you go by talent, which I heard you 2 seconds ago you say it's not about, that shouldn't be a quote criteria. But I think that in their case, it was a combination, name, depth, as well as Justin Fields.
Well, yeah, we knew exactly what the selection committee thought of Ohio State when their first rankings came out, and I think Ohio State only had 3 games played, and they ranked them number 4 in the country. They didn't deserve a number 4 ranking. They had beaten Penn State, Rutgers, and Nebraska. But they evaluated, they blew the 3 out, so that helps, but they basically were evaluating the team, the roster. Yeah. The other portion of this that is brought up from time to time is, are you evaluating the team based on the entirety of the season, or are you saying these are the 4 best right now? Because Oklahoma had a better claim as, we're one of the 4 best right now. We lost 2 really early, and we're on a roll now. We won 8 straight. So do you say, okay, well, they're one of the 4 best right now, or do you say, we need to count the week 1 game and the week 2 game just as much as the week 10 game?
Going back for a second, Mark, when they came up with a selection committee.
Yes.
If there was then and even now, I had no question as far as the men as well as ladies that was a part of this committee.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems as time is going on that maybe the committee needs to be reevaluated. Because it seems like, for whatever reason, as in some cases in life, we have our own biases. And, maybe maybe my SEC lean is too strong, or my ACC lean is too strong, or Big Ten, et cetera, is too strong. And maybe it might be a matter of getting other men as well as women involved that have no biases or won't allow their biases, SEC sunglasses or ACC, et cetera, sunglasses to affect their view as far as how it should be, as far as to have this, quote, playoff. Because if it's only going to be by name recognition only, not what is done on the field, then what is the purpose of it? Because I really would not want to see, Mark, as far as this playoffs go to 6 and 8 teams. Because really, honestly, if you were to go there as far as 6 to 8 teams, I don't think it would have really any effect. Because if I'm a team that has 85 strong players, and you only have, say, maybe 40 at best, whether it's old math or new math, 80 is going to supersede 40.
So I agree with you that most likely, had we had an 18 playoff over the last 7 years during the college football playoff era, we would have had the same results. Alabama would have won a ton of games, and Clemson then, and then Ohio State, and we would have seen the same thing basically. But do I know that? No, I'm conjecturing. I'm projecting that would have happened. But do we know that? No, of course we don't know it. Secondly, I still think that we still should do what is fair and equitable and right, rather than saying, you know what, it's not going to matter. If we really think it's not going to matter, we could go back to the BCS days and just get 2 teams in there. Although I thought that was a disaster and could point that out year by year by year. But when it comes to whether you're choosing the 4 best teams or choosing the teams that most deserve it or earned it, you know, I'll point to 2019 because, Kevin, you probably weren't watching me at this point, but after the conference championship games were played in 2019, that was the most clear decision the committee's ever had. It was obvious. Clemson, Ohio State, and LSU were undefeated. And then Oklahoma was the only conference champion with 1 loss. So it was obvious. They had the easiest decision they've had these 7 years. Easy. Boom. There it is. It's clear cut. There's no argument. But people asked me all that week, who were the 4 best teams in the country? And I'd say, whoa, wait a minute. If you're asking me just flat out, who are the 4 best teams in the country? I agree with the committee. They chose the 4 teams that earned it. Is Oklahoma the 4th best team in the country? No, they're going to get housed by LSU. You know who the 4th best team in the country is? It's Alabama. They should be in the playoff, and we're just going to select the 4 best teams. I don't care what their record is. They're not going to get trucked by LSU. They just played them to a 46-41 game about 4 or 5 weeks ago. They should be in the playoff. If we're just going to select 4 teams and you're leaving it up to me, it would have been LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, and Alabama in 2019. But they didn't earn it. They lost 2 games and didn't go to the conference championship game.
Yeah. And that was the deciding factor. You just stated as far as the 2 losses and, importantly, the second loss. If they would have won the Auburn game, then they would have had, quote, an argument.
Yeah.
But the thing is, let's just be honest, Mark, when it comes to the university, the old SEC fatigue, Alabama fatigue is alive and well. And by that being the case, that was an easy out. Okay, Alabama loses. Plus, they don't have Tua. Hey, we're going to go in a different direction.
Well, I don't think it's an easy out necessarily. I think they still did the right thing. You need to reward the teams that win the games and win conference championships.
Okay, well, let's go back for a second. How it benefited the University of Alabama. The year that I think it was like Georgia and Auburn played in the SEC championship
in
game.
17.
Auburn lost, and Alabama
Sure.
still came in through the back door, and he won it. So,
the year after Ohio State won the national championship in 2015, they actually, if you look at the roster in terms of NFL players, had a better team in 2015, but they got tripped up once. They missed the playoff. Were they one of the 4 best teams in the country? Yes. They didn't make the playoff. They didn't earn it. They didn't win the Big Ten. They still went 12-1, but I would have loved to have seen them in the playoff instead of Michigan State playing Alabama in a rematch of their 2014 game, because that would have been epic. So if somebody was said, Mark, you select the 4 best teams, I would have said, too bad, Michigan State. You earned it. You beat Ohio State head-to-head, but you're not one of the 4 best teams. You freaking lost to Nebraska, 5-7 team, and you pulled a lot of games out that you had no business winning, and Michigan gift wrapped a game when a punter fumbled the ball and flipped it up in the air. You know, they won every conceivable crazy way that year. So they're not one of the 4 best teams, and we all knew it, but they earned it. They won the Big Ten championship fair and square. It's not their fault. And then they got trucked by Alabama. So we should have put Ohio State in there. We're just going to select the 4 best teams.
So, in a respect, Mark, I guess with the whole saying, everything comes, as far as things coming around full circle, and Alabama, as far as quote the process of selection, got the short end of the stick, and then in turn, was the benefit of the same someone else getting the short end of the stick as far as that facilitated their winning a national championship.
Mm-hmm. Interesting stuff.
Wow.
All right, Kevin. Well, I appreciate the call. Anything else?
No, just thanks for indulging, Mark. Greatly appreciated. Hey, this is the first time I've been able to catch you all live, and I'm glad that, hey, timing is everything. I was able to enjoy the conversation. Hey, enjoy what you do. You take care, and hey, just take care.
Thanks, Kevin. Have a good one.
Hey, thank you. Delightful.
Press 1 to start the call or 2 to decline. The call will start at the beep.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Ballard. How you doing?
Ballard. I'm doing well. What's going on?
Not much. Just wanted to kind of go along with what you were talking a little bit about that previous caller, as far as, the selection committee and the teams picked this year. And, I really just wanted to talk about playoff expansion. Now, here's the thing. The only pros and cons. The only pro I see in it is we get extra football games. But, I mean, it really would just be a letdown because if you notice in the playoff semifinals, half of them, probably more than half of them, have been just straight blowouts in the semifinals. And, I mean, like, even in the first year, what was it like? I think it was like 42-20 Oregon over Florida State in the first Rose Bowl of the playoff era.
59-20.
Do what?
59-20.
Oh, 59-20. Okay. Well, I mean, it's still, blowout's a blowout. But, and then, of course, you've had other games. Clemson 31, Ohio State 0. That same year, Jalen Hurts, a freshman, beats up on Washington 24-7. I mean, there have only been, by my count, there's the Rose Bowl with Oklahoma and Georgia. That was a double overtime for the Dogs. And then I guess last year's Fiesta Bowl with Ohio State and Clemson.
Yeah.
I guess it was like the only two close games. So I'm not here to say we need to go back to a two-team system or anything. I'm not here to say that. But, I mean,
the two-team system was awful. Awful.
Oh, yeah, it was. That
All
was
right.
terrible.
Okay.
So I'm glad we switched to the playoffs. But, this whole thing about expanding the playoffs for more teams and giving extra teams that deserve a chance. I mean, if it's going to be blowouts, then what the heck is the point? Because
we don't know. The games haven't been played, though. We don't. I know we think we know. We think we know what would happen, but why? Let's say we had a boxing tournament. I might be headed down the path of a horrible analogy, but let's say we had a boxing tournament, and I'm a scrawny 175 pounds and so forth and so on, and have no business being in a boxing ring. But let's say I just came up against three just complete duds, and so I advanced in this tournament, and I'm going to take on some just world-class 175 pounder for the championship of our tournament. Everybody in the world is going to know I'm going to get my brains beat in, but under the format that we just created, I've earned a spot.
Right. And that's fair. I mean, there are teams, I think every team that has made the playoffs has easily, I don't want to say easily, there's been a couple controversial deals with like the fourth team or whatever,
So that's the thing, Ballard, not to cut you off. My issue with it is not that there have been teams in the playoff that did not earn it, but there have been teams left out that earned it just as much as the fourth team.
Right. That's what
that's the issue I've got.
This year.
Only one of many,
like
but that's one. Yeah.
Yeah. A few years ago, it was Alabama in the fourth spot against Clemson or Ohio State. It came down to that. This year we saw there were quite a few teams, but I think the two main teams were Notre Dame and then A&M. And I feel like, we know what ended up happening in that Rose Bowl. Bama just dominated like they did everybody else. And maybe they looked at it the same way for A&M. Like, well, we already saw them play this year. We know what's going to happen. And if Bama's better, it's just, I wish.
It sounds like you're arguing for an 18 playoff, Ballard.
Well, I'm just, on one hand, there's, controversy over
which teams should get in. But then there's also the point, like, what does it matter if what we've already seen has been blowouts in the semifinals? You get what I'm saying? Like,
Okay, let's evaluate that again real quick here. So we've got 7 years of this. We've got 2 semifinal games per year. That's 14 games. In 2014,
Yes.
we had an Ohio State-Alabama game that came down to a touchdown, 1 score. It was a great game.
Yes.
In 2015, okay. In 2015, I understand that the final score between Clemson and Oklahoma was, I don't know if it was a blowout. It was like 16 or 18 points. That game was a 1-point game in the third quarter. Is it that awful that we watched Clemson and Oklahoma play and the score was 17-16 in the third quarter? Is that awful of a game?
All it really said was Clemson pulled away in the fourth, but up to that, it was a really good game.
There you
But
go.
anyway.
Okay, 2016. I, just like everybody else, had no doubt that Alabama was going to beat Washington, and during that game was winning the game. But even that game was 17-7 sometime in the fourth quarter. Is that really that awful of a game?
No. It was
Okay.
10 points.
Okay.
And then ultimately they won by 17.
Yeah, they won by 17. 2016. 2017, as you mentioned, we had the great Rose Bowl game between Oklahoma and Georgia.
Oh, yeah. That was probably the most entertaining I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Double overtime.
The other game wasn't a very interesting game. Clemson couldn't do anything on offense. I don't know how to categorize that game, but they didn't. Again, I was watching a 17-6 game in the fourth quarter. Whatever. I won't count that as being a decent game. Okay, 2018, we saw 2 bad semifinal games. 2019, then we saw that Ohio State Clemson game. And then here in 2020, I don't know how you want to rate that Ohio State Clemson game. I guess you're not going to rate that as a good game. Okay. So we got 6. So we got 6 out of 14 that were either great games or decent games. My argument, regardless of how good or bad the games have been, so if Alabama goes on to win the next 5 national championship games and they win them all like they did Monday night, are we going to cancel the whole thing and say, why don't we just award the team that looks the best during the season and we'll just give it to them? Because why are we playing these games?
No,
So-
we all. That'd be ridiculous.
Okay. So
Yeah.
if we start in 2014, let's go through the same exercise real quick. 2014, you had one undefeated team, Florida State. You had Alabama, Oregon, Ohio State, TCU, Baylor, 5 teams with 1 loss. And you only had 3 spots. So we've got a problem there. And the problem wasn't solved. There was a decision made, but the problem wasn't solved just because Ohio State, and I even take exception to people saying Ohio State got the 4th spot. Well, no, they had 1 loss, just like Oregon and Alabama had 1 loss. And so did TCU and Baylor. We had 5 teams and 3 spots. All right, so that's a problem. The next year in 2015 was, I won't go through that, but it was fairly clear cut. But there were teams in there that proved out not to be as good as teams that were left out. Anyway, 2016, you got this Ohio State-Penn State issue where one of them won it head-to-head. One of them, the same team, was the conference champion, Penn State, but Ohio State had a better record and they had better wins. So one of them got chosen. One of them got left out. 2017, we had that Ohio State-Alabama situation that you talked about. And that's not counting UCF going undefeated. 2018, we've got Ohio State 12-1, a conference champion. Oklahoma 12-1, a conference champion. How do you decide which one of those 2 go in? Well, they just decided. But is there a real delineation between Ohio State and Oklahoma? They're both 12-1 and a conference champion. Was that fair? No, it's not fair. But one of them had to get left out. Was it fair that Notre Dame played one less game and didn't play in a conference and didn't play a conference championship game? No. And then here we had this year with Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Cincinnati, Oklahoma, and I could make arguments for all four of them. You still with us, Ballard? Or I'm just talking. I think Ballard left us. You know what? You could even go to 2019. Okay. Oklahoma got in, 12-1, won the Big 12. Oregon left out, 11-2, won the Pac-12. Just because they lost 2 games and they lost 1 game, there is nothing to compare those 2 teams by. They don't play the same teams. They don't even play the same teams that play the same teams. There is nothing to distinguish those 2 teams. It's not like the NFL where we can say, okay, this team went 10-6, they made the last playoff spot. This team went 9-7, they missed the last playoff spot. Because their schedules are basically, they both played the Ravens and the Texans and the Jags, and they played pretty much like 13 of the same 16 teams on their schedules. So we can say confidently that 10-6 team, we're not going to say they're better, but they earned it over the 9-7 team. But when Oklahoma's sitting in the Big 12 at 12-1, and Oregon sitting in the Pac-12 at 11-2, there's no crossover games to tell us anything about those 2 teams against each other and what's fair and what was earned.
The call will start at the beep.
That's why you let all the conference champions in. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
It's Reasonable Gump.
Oh, there he is. What's going on?
Hey, I wanted to hop in on this playoff discussion, as you know I always like doing.
Oh, I love the playoff conversation.
I'm pretty sure if it's not your most numerous, it's got to be your favorite, right?
It's up there.
Ragging on the ACC.
Ragging on the ACC. Oh, I don't want that to get out there. I don't want that to be some narrative that people think I just rag. I rag on the ACC because it's awful. When it ceases to be awful, I will cease to rag on the ACC.
Well, of course. Then you won't have any ammunition. Then it's not fun anymore if you're just making stuff up.
Yeah.
But anyway, I wanted to ask you something. So, in our history of talking about the playoffs, you've always been a very big conference championship guy.
Yes.
I remember a couple years ago I asked you, I posed for you that 8-5 Georgia Tech won the ACC, that you would want them to get in over an 11-1 Alabama who lost to Auburn at the end of the year.
Well, Alabama at 11-1 would still get into my playoff. That excellent of a team would still get into the playoff as well.
But not in this 4-team one. You're all about conference champions right now.
Well, yeah, we need conference champions.
Because
but
you always say that you think the conference championship should mean something.
Absolutely. But an 8-5 conference champion is not going to make it in this playoff system. We can't even get all the conference champions in anyway. But go ahead with your point.
Right.
Go ahead. I'll shut up.
Anyway, my point is what I wanted to ask you is why. What makes you think the conference championship games are there to get in the playoffs? Like, why is there meaning tied to the playoffs? Because conference championships and championship games have been around for far longer than the playoffs have.
Sure.
So, if you don't make it in the playoffs, does that then make your championship meaningless? Because I don't think it does.
It doesn't.
I think the meaning of winning the conference goes way beyond getting into a playoff system. That's some 13 suits in a room somewhere decided.
Okay, so I'm agreeing with what you're saying, but it's not reality. And this is what I mean. Does a conference championship mean a lot? To me, yes. To old traditional college football fans, yes. To this playoff era and the people that watch games and talk about games, does it mean anything if it's not tied to the playoff? No. there is more meaning given to an Alabama or Ohio State who were selected to go to the playoffs as a non-conference champion than all sorts of conference championship teams that didn't get selected to the playoffs.
Okay, so you're basically saying the same thing that has happened to the bowl games has happened to the conference championships.
I think so.
The Pac-12 conference champ. But by the way, I'm not saying this derogatorily or like I'm being snarky. I'm actually just clarifying because I kind of think this is true as well. The Pac-12 championship game essentially means nothing right now because it hasn't meant anything since that Washington team got in.
Yeah, nobody has paid attention.
Everyone just assumes that, by the time they get there, neither of those teams are even in the conversation.
Absolutely. It's the lowest rated, I guaranteed, of the conference championship games, even though it's played alone on a Friday night. And this past season, that game plus the Big 12, even though it was entertaining between Iowa State and Oklahoma, most people viewed that as neither one has a chance of making the playoff. Therefore, there was little to talk about concerning that game. But you are right. Your original statement, I completely agree with, that this whole structure wasn't built at the same time to say, we are establishing conference championship games and a playoff. Therefore, there should be a connection between the conference championship games and the playoff. You're absolutely right. They occurred at different times. So although the playoff committee has been hypocritical in initially saying that the conference championship games were a huge factor in their selections, and they've been minimized ever since because it's been easier for them to become more vague in their criteria so that they can let themselves off the hook when they need to.
Yeah, you are completely right about all that. I kind of think the championships may still matter a little bit more than you maybe give them credit for because those Florida receivers did not sit out the Alabama game, even though they had a zero chance of making the playoffs, even if they had pulled the upset. That's just one little example, but we haven't really seen players start to sit out for.
Did they really have a 0% change? So I agree with your statement. I do agree with your statement that maybe I'm minimizing the conference championship games too much, and I hope you're right that more is that there is more weight given to it by the players, if not the people watching. But I don't know that Florida didn't have a chance. If Florida pulls off that upset against Alabama and they're having their resume put up against Notre Dame's, the way Notre Dame played against Clemson, I don't know.
0% chance.
I don't know about that.
And maybe even negative. People may be paying to keep them out. Like Notre Dame's one win over Clemson would still balance out that loss. Florida's shoe defeat over LSU completely tanked them. I mean, no, I saw no chance at all of that happening.
Okay.
If they had not blown it to LSU, of course, everyone was saying that all they had to do in the weeks before is beat Alabama and they're in. But then it's the completely inexplicable performance they put against LSU just completely ruined that, in my opinion, and I think in a lot of people's opinion. I mean, were they really in the conversation? Do you remember any of that actually happening? Most people, if they even glanced a mention of Alabama to Florida in the week leading up to it, they just were talking about how badly Alabama's going to win, like 20 points or more.
Well, that's the thing. If Alabama would have been somebody else, if they would have been some other team that was certainly well respected and had a high ranking and all that, but they look so invincible, and because they've got the name Alabama, and certainly they proved it out, that I think Florida was given less playoff conversation leading into that game, not because they wouldn't have had an argument or wouldn't have been considered, but because it was a foregone conclusion to just about everybody that they weren't going to win the game anyway. They were a 17-point underdog.
Yeah, and honestly, that was just a ridiculous overreaction to the previous week.
Sure, it was.
Anyway, no, I think Notre Dame's record. I mean, Notre Dame finished their regular season undefeated, beating what at the time was the number one team in the country. So I really don't know why people give Notre Dame so much grief for this season. They're not the only team that got blown out in the playoffs.
Sure.
So actually, 3 out of the 4 got blown out.
Yeah.
So I really don't get it. They actually played Clemson better than Texas A&M played Alabama. Believe it or not, their loss was. I mean, they were both blowouts. We're kind of splitting hairs here, but as soon as you remember it, that night after that game, everyone is on here just saying, "Oh, Notre Dame is just the worst thing, the worst program on the planet. It's embarrassing that we're even talking about them." Just after that one loss against Clemson, and everyone seemed to have forgotten that Alabama did the same thing worse to Texas A&M.
See, that's where I go beyond.
It was mind-blowing to me.
That's where I go beyond the point differential of the two games, though. I would rate Texas A&M's performance to be better than Notre Dame's performance for this one reason, that game was 14-all in the second quarter. Texas A&M, Alabama. Once Notre Dame went up by a field goal in the first quarter, they got shredded for 31 straight points. And Clemson's basically their final score. They scored 34. They had a 31-3 lead like midway through the third quarter. Who knows what that final score could have been? Where for Alabama, it was more Texas A&M hung in the game probably until about, 6 or 7 minutes left in the second quarter. Oh, it was tied. I don't know what the halftime score was. Maybe it was like 28-14 or 24-14 or something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
But it was still considered a game versus Clemson routed them from about the, fourth or fifth series of the game. Anyway, I considered the Clemson route to be more egregious than the but you're correct. From a point total, 28's more than 24.
I mean, maybe, but I would turn around. Get the obvious one I can hold up here is that Notre Dame did beat Clemson. No one wants to hear. Well, actually, apparently everyone wants to hear. I don't want to hear anything about injuries. Even with all those injuries, Clemson's still more talented than Notre Dame. They shouldn't have lost that game, but they did. Notre Dame won it fair and square. And I would say at least something. Notre Dame at least proved they had some semblance of a defense, and Texas A&M proved that they had absolutely none at all. So I still held Notre Dame's performance. And by the way, this is coming from me. All right, I have absolutely zero reason to defend Notre Dame ever, but it was just ridiculous to me that everyone they get one that they lose their first game. And it's the last game of the season, and everyone just writes them off immediately. And it's just, it was strange. Obviously, I didn't think they were one of the 4 best teams. I thought, honestly, looking at the whole landscape, looking back now, I think Oklahoma is probably the 4th best team. But I've never been an advocate for the 4 best teams getting in. I think it's ridiculous. It should just be the 4 most deserving teams. And usually at least 2 or 3 of the 4 spots are filled by both the most deserving and the best. It's not like those are always different. They can usually coincide. The problem, we keep having arguments every year because it usually seems to come down to just that one 4th spot. It's when there's a team that's clearly better, but they didn't do their homework and they didn't study for the test, so they failed. Whereas this other team over here is clearly not one of the best, but they did everything the right way, and they deserve to get in. And I thought that was Notre Dame clearly. To me, there was no argument at that point.
Okay. Yeah, to me, like I said, I sat here taking calls from all sorts of people after the conference championship games, and to be honest, I said I haven't selected my 4th team, but for conversation, I've got to make a selection because I know that's what I'm going to be asked all night. But when the show was over, I took my notepad, Cincinnati, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, and I started ranking wins and trying to categorize them and trying to come up with some logical way of differentiating teams, and I selected Notre Dame.
All right, so just real quick, moving forward here. So, do you really want the 8-team playoff to have that 8th spot reserved for a Group of 5?
I want there to be a decision made as to whether they're going to be included or excluded, not this vague. We consider them, we review them, we're going to rank them. We'll rank all sorts of Group of 5 teams 9th and 15th and 22nd, but I just went through and posted a video where I went through 18 playoffs and what they would have looked like through this playoff era. And shoot, that Central Florida team that beat Auburn was only 12th in their rankings at 12-0. So why include them? Why? Why tease them? Why patronize them?
No,
exclude them.
It's ridiculous.
Or include them. One or the other. I'm okay with either
Here's
one.
My problem. Here's my problem with including them as that last spot.
Okay.
We're still effectively holding them hostage as lower class citizens.
Sure.
The Power 5 gets seven slots out of a Group of 5 conferences. There's 5 or 6 of them. No, yeah, Group of 5. There's 5 those conferences, but they only get one single spot.
Only get one guaranteed.
That's completely unfair.
Oh, sure, it's unfair.
Okay. So,
but at least
that's
there's
why I have a
entry.
serious problem with that too, because instead of being vague about it, I mean, I guess you making chalk this up to a pro that at that point we would just be upfront and honest about it. Yeah, we see your conferences as lesser class citizens. You get one slot, we get 7.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's ridiculous. I think everyone would benefit more if they just had their own playoff. I mean, and I think it would be watched too. I mean, I think there was a lot of interest in that BYU Coastal Carolina game.
But why was there? Why was there? There was interest because there was this thought out there that if whoever wins this game, they're going to be given credit for a good win and they're still undefeated, and they may just make it interesting or make it a headache for the playoff committee. That's why.
I don't agree with that. I think there was plenty of interest from people like me who are genuinely interested in watching these schools that have to operate on a much lower budget. Basically don't get any recruits they want other than the leftovers, and that can still put together. It's basically all coaching at that level. You can't just talent your way through anything. You got to coach. You got to be a really good solid teams. And I think there was a lot of interest from watching of those kind of teams go at it.
Really,
I think there'd be a lot of interest from watching. Like if I could go back and pluck Boise State out of 2009 and match them up with Central Florida 3 years ago, a game that means absolutely nothing in the playoff picture, I think everyone would watch that.
I don't think so.
I think a lot of people would want to watch Central Florida play Cincinnati.
Sure, there are college football fans that watch college football that enjoy the game, but the vast majority were talking about that BYU Coastal Carolina game because of playoff ramifications or theoretical playoff ramifications. How many times do the Boise States of the world play another team that pops up as a good team in the Mountain West, and nobody pays attention to those games? How many American Conference games are there and have there been through the years that were really good games? Memphis, Cincinnati kind of games, and Houston when they were good, and people didn't pay attention to them. And there was also the cachet of Reasonable Gump. There was also this cachet of we're in this pandemic year. People are scrambling to schedule games. We're seeing cancellations, 10 or 12 of them every week. And it was just this, there was an interesting component to just on a Thursday, two teams saying, let's play, let's get it on, let's go, we'll travel. Well, there was that unique component to it that we're not going to get if that game's just on the schedule in the middle of the summer, and we all know it for months and months and months. Okay, BYU's playing Coastal Carolina. Okay, great. It was the uniqueness of the situation.
I think a 4-18 playoff would kind of satisfy a little bit of that uniqueness, or because you'd be matching up these teams that don't play each other throughout the year. I mean, pretty much every Group of 5 conference has one. Well, not everyone, but the ones that do have one kind of shining team right now. And also the day or night after that game, I remember a lot of people calling in your show really excited, really happy, and having just watched this game and really just talking up Coastal Carolina. No one's thinking they're going to the playoffs. No one did, but they were still so excited to have gotten to watch the game. So I may be overselling it a little bit, but I think there would definitely be interest.
Okay. Earlier in the season, Coastal Carolina played Louisiana, and from a quality standpoint, that's roughly the same game, and nobody talked about it. Nobody cared.
Yeah. So you may be right, but I think also a lot of that has to do with, well, were the Power 5 teams playing at that same time?
Absolutely, they were playing.
Okay, so yeah, so then that right there. If you do it when if you would make a Group of 5 playoff, it's during its own time period where it's not competing with the Power 5 playoff.
Sure. That was going to be my next point. So they're both playing a college football season at the same time. So the Group of 5 is going to have to be scheduling, oh, well, we're going to play on. So if we expand to 8 teams in the Power 5, and then we've got 8 in the Group of 5, again, yeah, they're going to have to be in conversation with the Power 5 to say, when are you playing these games? Because we're going to have to avoid them like the plague, because we need and basically there's going to be this conversation like, this is just kind of our appetite for football. Okay, Ohio State and Clemson are playing Friday night, but we'll watch this Cincinnati Boise State game on Thursday night just to tide us over.
You have no faith in anyone watching Group of 5 football. Man, I can't convince you even a little bit.
I don't have much. No. If it's again,
I don't know if it's just the uniqueness of this year or something. I don't know, but I just really have a feeling that if we'd had four teams of Cincinnati, Coastal Carolina, Liberty, and I guess either BYU or Louisiana, that people would be tuned into it. Obviously not even close to as much as they are into the Power 5 playoffs, but enough that it would attract enough viewers that it would be profitable and meaningful, at least for the teams involved. Because we can debate how many people would actually watch it, but even a little bit, and it's still going to be more valuable to the Group of 5 as a whole than one sacrificial lamb that they would be if you gave them a spot in the 8-team playoff. It's the Power 5. I'm sure every 1 in 100 years or something they would pull the upset, but I hate, just like you and I hate the thought of bye weeks. People want to have 16 playoffs, or what is it, 10 or 12 or something.
Yeah.
Teams are getting an unfair advantage. Well, and having one group of 5 slot in a 18 playoff would be just you're basically just tossing them a bone and giving all the Power 5 teams, a feast of 7 slots to get.
Okay, well let's also understand what recent history has shown us is that I would in no way be predicting or project a group of 5 team to make it through the layers of 3 playoff rounds to win a national championship under those circumstances. But we have seen over the last X number of seasons that the count in the New Year's 6 game since 2013 is 4-4. Houston beat Florida State. UCF beat Baylor. UCF beat Auburn. There have been those games where they're playing a pretty similar opponent to what they would play in a 18 playoff, unless of course they get the last seed and they're always playing the number 1 seed. I don't know how we would work that out. There's a couple different ways to look at that, but if Cincinnati's always, or the group of 5 rep is always having to play the 1 seed, then you're going to have that. But over the course of this playoff era, and even before that, the group of 5 has played a top 8 to 12 team, Wisconsin, Penn State, and they've competed. They didn't win those games, but they've beaten Florida State and Baylor and Auburn. So maybe they pull off more upsets in the first round than we think that they could, depending on their seeding.
Yeah, they might. But my argument isn't based on whether or not they could or would pull off the upset. My argument is mainly just goes back to you're just giving them 1 spot out of the 8.
How many spots do you want to give them? Well, my other format is you go to 16 and you give them as many spots. Basically, what you do is you go, this is the way I think it should be done. And this very much takes away from the NCAA tournament in basketball, which, here it is that you go 16 and you go with all the conference champions, all 10 of them. And then you've got 6 wildcard spots that are going to get plucked up by the SEC and the Big Ten and on down the line. But you're at least going to have all those conference championship teams from the group of 5 involved.
Are we taking one of the regular season games out to do this, to make room for that?
Sure.
All right. I actually, the more I thought about that, because you were talking about it, I think last month or 2 months ago or something, it actually is a pretty cool idea. But I would only be for it if you could take off one of the regular season games, because
sure,
just putting these these college athletes through more and more games, and
sure,
the wear and tear on their body and stuff without any sort of compensation at all.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's easy for us to sit here and say, yeah, let's play more games and play this big playoff. And it's easy for us to say, well, we don't have to go out there and go through the workouts and get pounded 60 plays a game. So the legitimacy of it is beautiful, but also the novelty of it. Because on one hand, you truly think about this. If you're taking 10 conference champions and the 6 best teams that did not win conferences, so you got the 5 Power 5 champions, and then you got 6 wild cards. There is no question that you've got the 11 best teams in the country in this tournament. Now, after that, those other 5 champions that won the Sun Belt and the MAC and Conference USA, then you may have the 32nd best team in the country and the 57th best team in the country, and you may have some ugly games, but at least there's a novelty, and at least they earned it based on their schedule and their qualifications. But I don't think there's any question you're at least going to have the 11 best teams in the country playing in this tournament.
My one big fear of that is that you would no longer get any of these cool regular season matchups like LSU and Texas or Alabama, USC, or Ohio State and I don't know, Oregon, Georgia, Notre Dame. I just don't.
Well, absolutely, you would.
it would be like college basketball. One of the reasons why it's a broken sport is because no one cares to turn on their television for the regular season anymore.
Oh,
They lost a game. So what? The number one team just went down to an unranked team who hasn't won a game yet. Who cares? They'll still make the tournament.
oh, reasonable Gump. No, 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 no. Okay, I'm going to work on a 16-team playoff, and I'm going to go down through the years, and we'll see who makes the 16-team playoff. But there's going to be a whole bunch of 10-2 teams. I think you're rarely going to see a 9-3 team in the playoff. And especially if you play those at home, then what's the incentive of winning a conference or having a better record? Or do you want to go play in Madison, Wisconsin at the end of December? Does Texas A&M want to win that game and play at home, or do they want to go to Madison, Wisconsin at the end of December and play their playoff game?
Or they could just make their schedule easy and finish with a better record.
Or, as I've stated many times, my playoff system goes hand in hand with a scheduling adjustment and a scheduling format. So the schools no longer make their schedules. We make their schedules. So they can't say
yes, but you didn't mention that before. If that starts happening, then I'm all for it.
There you go.
But if you have, but that's not going to happen. They're not talking about taking the schedules out of the hands of the school. They're just talking about expanding the playoff. If you expand it to 16 teams, human beings are selfish by nature. Human beings run these schools, which means they're going to be selfish and be like, okay, look, I can win my conference and get in automatically, but if I don't, I got to make sure the rest of my record is perfect.
Well, okay, first of all, again, I will restate that if I'm in charge, the scheduling has to be brought along with the playoff revision. They both have to be revised. It has to go hand in hand. The scheduling has to be fixed.
Go hand in hand. Okay.
Scheduling has to be fixed. I got to cut my videos on this. Here we go. I'm fired up. So if not, then let's say we don't get that done. We only expand the playoff. The teams, the individual programs continue to do their own scheduling. Well, then you put in some type of metric to let them know we're going to reward quality wins and even to a certain extent quality, I'm putting that in quotes, losses, that we may select a 9-3 team that played a really difficult non-conference schedule over your 10-2 team because you refuse to go schedule any one non-conference.
And you're gonna have a lot of people arguing at the end of every year, just like they are now.
Yes, but see, the beauty of the argument is that you can always say to any team that didn't make the playoff, you still had the opportunity to ensure that you would make the playoff by winning your conference.
By winning your conference.
We cannot say that now. Win your conference. You want to make the playoffs for sure? Win your conference. And don't gripe about it.
Which is one of the main arguments I use for the 3 at-large spot, potential 8-team playoffs. Is no more arguing and bickering because they gave you an automatic route. If you don't win your conference, then you got to hope that you look the best.
Exactly, because you know as well as I do. You know as well as I do. Every time I bring up an 18 playoff, the people that don't like the 18 playoff say, "Oh, well, the number 9 team and the number 10 team are going to argue, and it's going to be the same thing." No. The rebuttal is you had the opportunity to win the conference and gain an automatic berth. So there's no arguing. All right, got some other calls here, Reasonable Gump. Appreciate it.
All right, yeah, I hear it. I'll talk to you later.
Oh, just missed them. Let's take another call if somebody else would like to call in. The number's at the bottom of the screen there, 860-325-3687. Nobody give me a score on the Rams-Packers game. It's on my DVR. All right. I believe we've come to the end of the line. I appreciate everybody jumping online this afternoon. Just wanted to talk some college football. Know that many of you will be watching the NFL playoffs, so I thought I'd jump on prior to the games this afternoon. Again, hit that bell for the notifications. That way you know when we're going live, and we will be announcing a live stream schedule very soon. See you next time.